to the air industry, if you will, the airport side and the airline side. So I spent my first 28 years or so with the airlines, most of that time with Delta Airlines, and then a little stint at the end there with American. And that was always exciting, and it was very interesting to go from the airline side. And I was responsible when I was at Delta as well as with American for the technology that was used in the airports, major airports. So when I went over to the airport side, I had a lot of background, a lot of familiarity with how things are done, and I adapted to that very well. And my two airports that I worked in were Tampa International and Orlando International. And I was in charge of IT at Tampa, and I worked with the IT department later in Orlando. So that my whole career, basically, except for one short year in the container shipping industry, has been with the aviation industry.
Okay, so how does this make you a scientist? Because you have to be a scientist to be able to write what you did. These novels are extraordinary. I mean, I could not put them down. I learned so much. And I asked people, do you know much about cyborgs? They look at me, no. I said, well, you will be.
Well, actually, no, I don't consider myself a scientist. I've done quite a bit of research, followed science fiction for years, and that played into what you might want to call my background or my knowledge as well. But it was really just a matter of researching, and all of it's out there today. And when you pick a topic, you can usually find somewhere on the internet today that wasn't available 20, 30, 40 years ago. You can usually find the detail that you want to find. So.
And that's what you did. I'm going to take off the glasses. Yeah. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. When I open the book, usually I can tell from the first chapter where we're going, but I really couldn't quite get that. I had to really get into this because I knew nothing. I mean, we all know a little bit about robotics. We look at that, but I did not know about cyborgs. The only thing that I did tell you is I had a friend who was, unfortunately, she was the mayor of West Palm Beach, and she wound up with ALS. And I was with 6 months a year. I spent time with her off and on. And I realized how sad it is. And you chose that disease to wrap around this whole idea of what could you do for someone like that?
Yeah, exactly. I was in ALS. I had a colleague who was a commercial airline pilot who came down with ALS. And to watch him go from somebody as vivacious and active as a pilot down to essentially a vegetable before he passed was quite revealing and quite upsetting, to quite honestly. A wonderful person, wonderful man. And so that got me triggered into ALS, because one thing with ALS, normally you still have your mind, even though your body's failing and will ultimately fail, you still have your mind. And that's what I needed for the cyborg. I needed a mind. I needed a human mind to be able to control and drive and live as a cyborg. So that's where I went with that.
That's right. And so I remember her human mind. She was still very good, and she moved down to Miami, and she, at the very end, when she really couldn't move her anything, just her brain was working, she wound up going out to Sonoma, where she wanted to die out there. But it was about 3 years for her. But now we know that some people with ALS, they are living longer, and they're working on things. But the whole idea right now, with you is ALS. It could be Parkinson's. It could be anything with the brain. But you chose that. And the interesting thing for me is that there was a whole program on, when you say cyborgs, a whole program with bodies, that are real. And that is amazing to me. I told you this before we talked. I think it's a perfect movie because it's glorious.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, in book 2, you get a hint at it in book 1, but book 2, we reveal how the cyborg came about. And basically, I'm not going to give away the secret, but if you read book 2, you'll see exactly how the cyborgs came about. And it might appear to be a little surprising.
Yeah, that's true. And I also mentioned to you when we talked before that National Geographic happened to have come out with a very large amount of pages and pictures of robots, serious robots, at the same time that I was reading your book. I mean, did you get to see that National Geographic?
No, I didn't, and I
Look it
subscribed
up.
to it. Yeah, I'll
You
have to look
need
it
to
online.
look it up because important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole field of robotics is evolving very, very quickly, and so even without my little secret in book two, I think what I'm describing here is certainly plausible. Maybe not by 2040, but certainly by the end of the century.
I don't know about that. I mean, you know, when you think about how fast they put vaccines now together and things that it's possible because, as you said, robots, everyone knows that a lot of the doctors, even though it isn't someone doing it for them, they work with robots because it's a better ending to the operation because it's more, you know, precise. And I think that the robots, oh, actually, let me say this. I was down, there's a very big center in Miami that deals with people with spinal injuries. And they have fantastic, I would say, clinics where you get to see people able to move their bodies because the robots are helping them. People with, you know, that they're really paralyzed. And when I saw that, and that even showed in the National Geographic magazine. So what you put together is not that far-fetched, at least eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the futurist Ray Kurzweil, and that's where I got a lot of my ideas, is reading some of his work. But basically, he's predicting that you'll be able to, I guess, download or upload your mind to a computer by around 2040. And that's where I want to say the title of his book, I'm having trouble recalling, but I believe it's Live Forever, has those terms in his title. And that's what he's talking about. If you upload your mind to a computer, it never dies. So, and then you're just one step away from being able to download that mind into a robot or a cyborg, however you want to call it, synthetic body.
So as an author, have you ever written anything before this?
I've written a couple of things, nothing I've ever published. And I did a child story for my daughter back in the 1980s for her, and I'm redoing it now for my granddaughter. So,
oh, nice.
but nothing that I ever published now.
Well, the one thing I hope that you're going to do more in this field, and the one thing I think would be added, be nice, is to have some people do graphics and illustrations for you. Because I saw, you see, your words are so good, and that's what a good author does. You developed your characters and every move they made. I mean, you were very clear, and there was romance in this. There was there were different people in it, but yet, if you had a couple of illustrations in the future, it would even be more exciting. I mean, your covers are beautiful. I'm going to show them again. This is the book one, and then this is book two. You did put some faces on your book two.
Right.
I got the feeling, though, too, that the government was not being so friendly.
Well, in the story, yes. It's really, if you look at it from the government's point of view, which I try to do, I'm not very successful at most of the time, but they've invested in the story billions of dollars in this technology. And they had, after several years, had yet to see a product. So they were getting impatient.
Yeah, but you know, let's just, we can tell everyone what was in book one, especially about this person who was very wealthy and he had a brilliant brain, and yet he was losing everything. He wasn't going to be living very soon. But it took quite a while, wasn't it? 10 years they had to, so they he really wasn't around for 10 years, not actually. His brain was, but not his body, right?
Right. He actually his body was around for about 7 of the 10.
Okay.
And that's when he opted to go through the procedure of actually removing his brain and placing it in stasis until such time that the downloads could be done to cyborgs or what have you. And we went through his deteriorated state over the period of years, starting with some symptoms where he lost control of his limbs, and then he began to lose control of his ability to eat or swallow, his ability to speak without computerized assistance, those types of things. And ultimately, he was at a point where he knew he was either had to do something or he wasn't going to be around much longer at all. And that's when he got with the doctors and decided to go through the procedure, have his brain removed, put it in stasis, which he didn't know how long that would be because at the time they still hadn't perfected the cyborg bodies. And by the way, his wife was the lead physician and working with the military on developing the cyborg bodies. So he knew that was coming. He just didn't know how long it would be. So that was his choice. And so fortunately, they did finish the cyborg body project. He was able to download into it and recovered from that whole procedure very well. And in book 2, actually, no, it's not book 2. It's the one I'm writing now. He decides he's going to come back into the public eye. And that gets really dicey because as almost a celebrity type person, I'm, a CEO along the lines of an Elon Musk, for example. He knows the news media would come crashing down on him. The medical community would come after him for how did you do this? What's the procedures and all that. So he's got to come back into society now very, very carefully as he does this because he wants to avoid all the negative press, if you will, or all the pressure from the press and the medical community. And of course, he doesn't want to jeopardize his wife's project by opening up what actually happened to him. So in book 3, which I've just started here recently, that's all going to come out as well.
It's amazing. So you're doing it. That's right. The book 3 will be amazing. But I wanted to go back. It was very clever that you made his wife such a part of it because can you imagine, but just a plain wife, it could have been something. But here's the woman leading this whole development, this whole project. And so here she didn't have her husband. I guess she could go talk to him. I don't know. Did I miss it? Where did they keep his brain?
It was actually kept, I used the term in there, I think, a couple of times, the brain in a bottle. It was actually put in a container that, fed it nutrients, fed it blood, fed it, what it needed to stay alive indefinitely.
But he was out of it. He wasn't in the brain. He couldn't think or anything.
No, he was in a coma state.
Of course.
A coma state. But even in that state, the Guardian was able to bring him forth and go about addressing the issues with the Civil War, and then also the issues with the first cyborg, Aaron, was the one that went and worked with Churchill in World War II to correct the timeline there.
Yeah, see, there were a lot of very interesting ways that was quite a surprise that you brought in this person called the Guardian or whatever it was, and you got him or it to change history. Yes, that was very strange. What made you think about that?
Well, everybody, I think, a lot of people think about, and I do too, what if? What if Stonewall Jackson had lived, with the Civil War had turned out differently? And if it had, what would that ensue over the coming decades? Same thing with World War II and Winston Churchill. If he had given in to his war cabinet and elected to try to negotiate peace with Hitler, what would that have meant to not only Europe, but also the United States? And then, of course, in the Pacific theater in World War II, there was a lot of debate among the Japanese war ministers, if you will, and military about continuing their invasion to the west coast of the United States, which they ultimately elected not to do, which is probably smart on their part. But what if that had happened? And you had both East Coast and West Coast being attacked by very formidable military engines.
Yeah, so you do bring in a lot of history as well. So let me just tell you, it's Kiel Barnekov, Barnekov. This is the book number 1 that we featured. Here's his book 2. And you can buy these books, and I suggest you do it. You're staying at home now, and these books are better than television. I mean, you really get into it. And would they just go to Amazon.com to get this?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to Amazon.com and search on my name, Kiel Barnekov.
Oh, right, Kiel Barnekov, rather than Shepherds of Destiny.
Right. Mm-hmm. You can search on that too, but it'll come up right to those books if you use my name.
Right. So. And they're great books. I mean, and I tell you, I warn you that if you just opened it up and start on page 1, 2, 3, you won't put it down. That's what happened to me. Before I reviewed it, I always look at a lot of books that come in, and I said, wow, this is different. And my first book on future science was A Stranger in a Strange Land. Remember that one?
Sure do.
That got me into science fiction. I just love that. But nothing compared to this. So, and it's funny. And before I read your book, I did not know what that word even meant. That cyber. I didn't know what a cyborg was. I bet most people don't. I've asked people about it. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So you've really brought in something. So you said you're working on the 3rd book.
Yes, definitely.
And how long does it take you to finish a book?
Normally it's about a year. By the time I go through editing and all that, it takes about a year. And this one may take a little longer because I intend for it to be a little bit longer than the first 2. So we'll see. Probably sometime in 21 we'll be putting it out there.
And when you're writing the book, do you outline something first? I mean, you have it all in your mind, I know, but.
Yeah, I do write down outlines, but it's sort of a living document as I go, because I'll do an outline and I'll start following it, and I'll go, well, wait a minute, what if this and what if that? And that I usually go back and modify the outline to at least show what I did, so I can remember it when I continue. But yeah, I try to use outline, but I use them loosely, I guess you'd say.
And the other question is, are these real people in your mind?
Yeah, I could say they are. And
they're real people in my mind. Wouldn't they be in yours?
Well, I tell you, what makes them even more real is that they're all the first names of my grandchildren.
Oh, see, now I didn't know that. That's special. You didn't say that in your, that's so good. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, not all the characters, but the main characters are,
right.
Except for Christian Barnett. He's, the CEO and the billionaire. Christian is not a grandchild, although it is the middle name of one of my grandchildren. So I guess you could say it is.
I was curious, and that mansion sounded pretty exciting, the one where they lived. Wow.
Yeah, the way I did that, I went out on the internet and started looking at properties and kind of pulling the best I found. And that's what made the Barnett Mansion.
Oh, it was spectacular. I forget, how did he make his millions? I don't remember that now.
Well, he actually inherited them. His parents were killed on a flight where they never found the wreckage, but they believe that the cockpit pressurization gave out on their aircraft, their jet aircraft, and that immediately put them all to sleep. And they just flew into oblivion and somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. And he was rather young. He was in his early 20s when that happened, but he had already been working with his father. The Barnett Industries is mainly a transportation systems and communications company that is global. I mean, you've probably read a lot about the coming electric cars, and also not just the electric cars, but the transportation systems in cities that will actually control your vehicle while you're in the city. And that's what Barnett Industries, that's one of their main avenues out there that they use. technologies.
Yeah, so that's it. So see, because of your profession, you knew a lot about this anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a part of a lot of this, a lot of automated. I know I first started with automated transportation back in the late 1980s, I guess.
Really?
Delta Airlines built a cargo facility in Atlanta, and the devices that went and put cargo into the bins in the facility and retrieved the cargo for delivery to the client were robotic. And they've just these little cars would run around the building and have arms that would extend and pull out the cargo and take it out to the delivery area where the client could get it. And that was back
in the 80s.
In the 1980s, yeah, late 1980s.
Also, see that. So you were a part of this for a long time, and you, but to do this with human beings is really, it was really very special. So it's again, I want to just tell you the name is, and it's unusual. It's Kiel, Kiel Barnekov, Barnekov, and it's called Shepherds of Destiny. There's a book 1, a book 2, and there's going to be a book 3 or maybe more. And you live in Florida. You live in North Florida, I think, don't you?
That's correct. Ormond Beach.
Yeah. And so have you have you formed any book clubs where you can talk to people about your books?
No, but not mainly because of I think COVID slowed me down. We started with a book club here in our area that met. I want to say they met either once a week or once every other week, and we had already distributed book 1 to the book club, and then COVID hit, so nobody could meet, and they hadn't brought out the new technology, the Zoom technology or any of that stuff yet. So I'm not sure. I've got to check back with those people to see if they're actually, started meeting again. Of course, we're pretty opened up in Florida right now. I don't know. I hope that stays that way, but we'll have to see where that goes.
Before we run out of time, I was curious on something that you had males. We only have 2 minutes left, but they were males that had this done. And so you decided not to do a female?
If you look at the end of book 2.
Oh yeah, right. I remember that now.
Yes, and book 3, yes, we're already writing that section right
I
now.
do remember that, right. Yeah, and Christian's wife doesn't seem to be too happy about that, if I recall. Is that true, or?
Well, it's the fact that she had been working on a female cyborg, but hadn't gotten to a point where she felt confident it was ready. And so she objected a little bit, but then the government kind of put some pressure on her and said, you need to do this. So, so she went ahead. She's going ahead with it.
Yeah. Kiel, they're so real. I just see them. They're part of now my life. And every time as in the future, cyborgs will be my great admiration for you and how you introduced it to me. Thank you very much for being with us. And we will have another interview with you in the future, but I just wanted to thank you.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for that great write-up too, the great article in your.
Yeah, well, it was worth every minute of it. I loved it. So we'll talk again. Okay, great. Bye. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.